Hello and welcome to CNBC Africa's special coverage of the third edition of the World Pension Summit Africa Special, hosted by Nigeria's Pensions Commission. I am Wole Famurewa, and thank you for joining us. Over the next half hour, we'll be bringing you some of the key messages and conversations around driving innovation across Africa's pension industry. For stakeholders in Africa's pension industry, it's an essential annual gathering where players reflect on best practices in the management and creation of pension schemes. The third edition of the World Pension Summit Africa Special moved the conversation about pensions and other social security programs in Africa a step further.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as I welcome you to this summit, I would like to leave you with a few posers. How do we build deep and efficient capital markets and financing models that will enable institutional investors such as pension funds to invest in infrastructure? How can pension fund managers in Africa mainstream environmental, social, and governance principles in their investment decisions with a view to promoting sustainable, impactful investments? How do pension fund managers and regulators leverage technology to stimulate the impact of pensions in our socioeconomic systems? What specific action steps can be taken today to begin the process of developing these practices? Distinguished experts, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am quite confident that these and other issues will be thoroughly deliberated and practical solutions provided over the next 2 days.
I'm really happy that this summit has embraced innovation as a key topic for the African pension world. And as I said before, innovation is something that can come from every individual in this room. To combine existing elements, existing concepts, and give them a new format or unexpected impact is one way of taking innovative steps. So let's develop innovations in the African pension industry, and I'm sure that this will all lead to more creativity in the pension world in Africa. And it can become a groundbreaking experience for the entire pension world, all over the world.
Without pension fund assets, the US high-tech industry might not now lead the world, for many firms would have been starved for vital capital or might have paid too high a price for it to permit success. I believe we possibly have more topics to discuss on the opportunities and challenges in Nigeria and Pan-Africa than our 2 days together in Abuja will allow. But I promise you, when we conclude our meeting at the end of the day on Wednesday, you will leave Africa Special more informed and hopefully more inspired about the power and potential of Africa's growing pension system and its investments.
With improving economic developments, we see a growth of middle-class families in Africa. With that, we do see more people saving more and also considering pension plans. There are still big differences among African nations given the economic conditions. But looking at the future, Africa is bound to be a leading player in the world as more and more people and families will prosper.
Former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who spearheaded the efforts to create a contributory pension scheme in Nigeria, reflected on global trends and developments impacting Africa in a keynote address.
Thankfully, many national governments across the continent have started demonstrating commitment towards reforming their pension and social security systems in line with global trends. These reforms have birthed a novel institution framework which requires that retirement benefits are fully and adequately funded. They follow the model introduced by the Chilean pension reform of the early 1980s, which was aimed at stemming the growth of pension liabilities, reducing fiscal cost of pension to government, stimulating domestic savings and increased private investment, and generating long-term funds for financing development projects, a welcome corollary of these reforms. I like innovation, and I like what you are talking about in the next 2 days: pension, innovation, and sustainability. But I will add 2 things. Your innovation must be with caution. Now, when people have to work all their days of their life that they were strong and they make contribution for their future. Now we cannot be too adventurous with so-called innovation.
The head of Nigeria's civil service, representing Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari, formally declared the summit open.
Most African countries are facing many challenges in the areas of the economy and security. These challenges heighten the demands on our meager resources and constrain our pursuit of infrastructure, which is traditionally seen as the sole responsibility of government. This summit is therefore a welcome development as it brings together experts, professionals in pensions and related fields, and indeed governments to discuss and exchange ideas on strategies to attract the much-needed private sector funding from both within and outside the continent. And this is to complement the efforts of national governments. It is also an opportunity for us as African countries to listen, learn, and share our perspectives on how best to move the African economic agenda forward. The federal government of Nigeria, on its part, will work to ensure that the required channels and support are put in place for pension funds and other institutional investors to provide the required financial intermediation in addressing Nigeria's infrastructure gaps. I hope other African countries and governments would follow suit. I therefore encourage delegates to actively engage and participate in these discussions so that the desired objectives can be achieved. On this note, it is my honor to declare open the 3rd edition of the World Pension Summit, Africa Special. Thank you and God bless.
After the official opening, delegates listened to a series of panel discussions, starting with one looking at revolutionary strides in pensions by African countries.
I believe defined contribution as defined contribution only without any guarantees. Governments are only throwing the risk on the people, and the people are not financially educated. They have no clue whatsoever that they are assuming the risk themselves. So most of the schemes in North Africa are defined benefits, although they are not fully funded, but you have to remember that most of the schemes are public service schemes.
The advantage of Mauritius pension business is that the Private Pensions Act and FSC rules have been consonant with the international norms and standards of the IOPS and the OECD. And Mauritius is becoming a major hub for setting up pension schemes catering for foreign members and expatriates as part of its developed and diversified strategy to sustain the competitiveness of the Mauritius jurisdiction. The FSC now licenses and regulates external pension schemes.
And in Ghana, children under 15 and elderly over 70 do not pay any health insurance premiums. The residual health insurance premiums comes from the VAT that are paid, and that is how it is funded. And as of 2016, there is a coverage of approximately 18 million individuals out of our population of about 28 million people in 2016.
The subsequent panel discussion addressed environmental, social, and governance issues and impact investing by pension funds.
Pensions are an amazing thing because they're the link between the past, the present, and the future. It's the money that workers have put in already, which exists now, which can be invested to make the future of the country. And I think that's a powerful message, and it has to be a powerful message not only to people working in this space when we talk about impacting investing, not only to drive impact investing as a way to make sure that people can actually see not only the outcomes of their investments in the form of, let's say on the one side, infrastructural investment, but also investment in organizations that are really striving for environmental and governance, to push forward environmental and governance issues.
What we are doing is we're institutionalizing luck, and we're identifying 1,000 ideas, businesses at startup stage every year. And the program is across Africa in English, Francophone, and Lusophone countries to see how solutions can be brought into our economy and our social space. What we look out for at the end of the day is the creation of over 1 million jobs, direct jobs. What we look out for is the increase in revenue of up to $10 billion across Africa. We believe that the entrepreneurs have more impact in solving these issues because they are on ground and they are able to cascade the solutions across. Now, the program is sector agnostic, and this is something pension funds administrators really should look at. What sectors should we invest in? For us, every sector has a problem, every sector needs a solution. But there are key sectors that will transform Africa. One of them is agriculture. Last year, we had 20,000 people apply for this program, and we selected 1,000. This year, we had over 45,000 people apply for the program. We selected 1,000. Now, the interesting part of the demographics is that of the 45,000, over 12,000 of them wanted a solution in agriculture. And 80% of those are the youth. So it has changed the narrative from saying the youth need to get involved in agriculture. No, they need to get involved in commercial agriculture. They're already interested. Many of them see clearly the issues from the basics up the chain. They want to be part of the solution, but they are inundated with many issues. And where we see funds coming, long-term funds, long-term investment coming, is in creating the enabling environment for these teeming thousands to invest and invest in a way that is commercially viable. When they stay there in that sector, the sector will see the boom that it requires.
The assets under management for impact investment in Africa is about $60 billion globally, And Africa accounts for just 15% of that. And one of the key issues we've had to grapple with over the years is the capacity of fund managers in Africa to actually structure transactions that fit into the impact investment space. And I'm aware there are a number of fund managers here present. They may want to maybe ask their questions at some point later. But I think for a summit like this, we must first of all identify what issues are and why has there not been the expected growth over the last decade in the impact investment space. First, I think is the issue of capacity. Most of the fund managers don't have the skills to actually balance in a structured manner, risk and reward. There's also an issue of measuring the real impact. How do you assess what's impact in terms of making an investment?
There's just not enough capital that's being allocated there to fund managers, especially those investing in Africa impact projects. And most of the reasons I get when talking to different LPs, which are investors, pension fund investors, development institutions as well as some angel investors who are focused on impact investing, is that, look, we don't understand this whole new concept, and because we have we have to take care of our investors, so return comes at the #1 list for our investors. And then the other thing that we hear is that, look, the geography, especially when you talk about Africa, is that, Africa, we don't understand the risk profiles of Africa. They keep changing every day. So part of what we have started doing in the fund management perspective is that we've taken the role of educating our investors and also taken the role of partnering with our investors to educate the portfolio project, the investees, the development partners, as well as the beneficiaries.
Innovation in the creation, administration, and management of pension funds in Africa would go a long way in reducing poverty for retirees across the continent. After the break, we'll bring you more from the World Pension Summit Africa Special. Stay with us. Welcome back to our coverage of the third edition of the World Pension Summit Africa Special, hosted by Nigeria's Pensions Commission. An expert panel also looked at how insurance can support micropensions and provide credit enhancements for pension fund investments.
Then, given this very long-term nature of liabilities, and a little bit like pension providers, insurers can offer access to illiquid investments. So asset classes such as property and infrastructure, which, given an insurer's ability to put it on their balance sheet, allows them potentially to offer that on occasion with investment guarantees.
We have a consistent framework for microinsurance. However, we see that the market is not following. So far, compared with Ghana, which has a very liberal and flexible environment, the Ritsima region is not taking off. And there I give you an idea why it is not taking off. Yesterday I got the results of a study which was conducted for the Togolese government to define the national strategy on financial inclusion. It occurs that 71% of the population has regular problems to face, their financial obligations. And 37% of the population has always problems. Every month they have to look for money. So can we talk about micro pensions? Maybe we have to talk about micro savings.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about the topic. And I think for me, the first thing I thought about was, let's look at pension. If we break pension, as you all know, into two parts, and we say one part is where you save for retirement, and the other part is where you receive the money you saved. So how does the insurer come in and help with this two-part process? If you look at the first part, you see the saving side. I think there's been a lot of talk about financial inclusion and ensuring that people are aware of saving money. I think the insurance side of it comes in to ensure people are comfortable with long-term savings. If you look at the Nigerian market, there isn't that comfort yet. People are not yet comfortable saving for a long term. If you ask them to save for 5 years, they'll be like, no, I want my money in 6 months. I want my money like a bank. I want my money. So how do you ask people to save for 25 years if they're not yet comfortable saving for 5 years, 10 years?
I see situations where people get into insurance and credit enhancement type programs. I've seen it as people move all the way into agribusiness. I think there's an insurance entity called MIGA that will provide you risk, political insurance risk. So the kinds of risk you're trying to protect yourselves against in investments will fall into the categories of maybe 3 or 4 of them. Political risk will be one. Execution risk, which is really being able to execute on an investment. There's financial risk, and then obviously there's currency risk, and maybe more importantly, there's headline risk. And headline risk can be a big one because you just don't want to find yourself investing in an entity that just had some bad press. That's just not a good thing.
Another panel provided a broad introduction to the concepts and dynamics of modern-day investments of pension fund assets.
In many emerging market countries where I've worked, the equity has depended on the availability of contractors. they play that equity role. And you know, they live, you look at their balance sheet, they live from project to project, and they just want to get the deal closed. And in India, there's this concept of jugaad. We'll figure out how to fix the problems later. And I'm sure you have African equivalents to jugaad. They don't always make the best long-term investors because their horizons are more just getting the next contract. And so the role of private equity, I think, it becomes very important.
DFIs they call them grant money in small quantities. And those grant monies are for all purposes equity. They don't have a return requirement as the same as equity. They need something back, but not necessarily equity return. Developers use that simply because they get to keep the upside on beyond the first capital and some return back. So development is entirely risk capital, and there is not that many players willing to take that risk.
My advice to the pension funds that I usually deal with is, look, you need to start thinking about the alternative assets. You need to think about real assets, about infrastructure, not only you know, as a perspective of maybe gaining more return, but from a risk management perspective. You also need to diversify your risk, because I see a lot of pension funds are very much exposed to concentration risk.
Domestic capital is the cake. Foreign direct investment is the icing. It's not going to come without a different risk perception. So domestic capital has to really underpin the infrastructure investment asset class. And one of the things that we have also observed as IFC is for every $1 billion investment in infrastructure, we expect to actually see new jobs of between 50,000 to 110,000. And we need to be concerned about this, especially because of the youth unemployment factor.
So I think return is key. I think if you're looking for real returns, you really have to start thinking more about alternative assets. I think people also on the panel mentioned diversification. I think that's a great idea. I mean, because you're looking for risk-adjusted returns, and you're looking for assets to play different roles in the portfolio. So therefore, having alternative assets that will give you yield, particularly dollar yield, that are high teens in this kind of environment, I think is very, very, very attractive.
The quality of the debt provider also determines the quality of the project, because not many debt providers have done project financing and hence miss out on the simplest thing. The equity guy takes advantage of that because they get to keep less of the risk. It's not a good thing, because eventually that will catch up. Eventually. So we, on power projects or on these sort of infrastructure projects, we actually have a say as to who is the debt provider. If the debt provider is not of the international standing, who have done these sort of projects, we as equity providers will not negotiate, will not allow the debt provider to negotiate the entire package. We will, as equity provider, will be involved in that discussion.
And we're not seeing necessarily good professional project developers, but this is why, you know, we as IFC said, okay, let's not look for perfection. We've created this $100 million internal fund, you know, for project development. We would allocate up to $4 million to co-develop a project with good emerging project developers, you know, people who have clear commitment, want to do things the right way, may not have the experience and capacity, but, you know, we will invest alongside with these developers.
Other panel discussions at the summit discussed pension systems in the context of financial inclusion, highlighting financial literacy programs, the development of micro-pensions, and the implementation of social security programs. There was also a session on the impact of technology on pension programs, showcasing new methods and technology used to drive the penetration of pension schemes. The first day of the summit ended with a dinner and the African Pensions Awards, which recognized achievements in this area.
The Africa Pension Awards is a springboard for nurturing and providing indigenous ideas for the development of sustainable pension and social security systems across the region, as well as realizing the developmental goals of the jurisdictions. I therefore congratulate ahead those institutions that will be celebrated tonight and encourage pension and social security institutions across the continent to keep showcasing their ideas in the future editions of the Africa Pension Awards.
The announcement of winners in several categories preceded a night of entertainment and networking. After 2 days of engaging conversations about Africa's pensions industry, delegates left Abuja, Nigeria, with a deeper understanding of how to bring innovation into the creation and management of pension funds across the continent. The knowledge gained at this year's event will go a long way in driving further reforms that should secure the financial future of millions long after they stop working. And that concludes our coverage of the third edition of the World Pension Summit Africa Special. I am Wole Famurewa. Thank you very much for watching.